We have an enormous problem in the Jewish community. Among our other serious problems, I think that the problem of civil discourse among us about a number of issues, but particularly about Israel, which is the issue that's a source of deepest passion for many of us. The way we talk to one another about this issue is a serious problem. It's a problem because what has come to be common, if not downright acceptable behavior, that is to say communication that includes all kinds of name-calling and wild accusations and utter disrespect for someone who holds a view different from their own, violates every Jewish norm of what constitutes acceptable speech, much less sacred speech, and violates the most basic Jewish principles about living one's life in such a way that one always holds in mind that every person that we meet is, like us, created in the image of God, much less that every Jew we meet is a person with whom we're deeply connected, regardless of what errors of disagreement we may have. Now, in the view of Jewish tradition, disagreement is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, Jewish tradition has always regarded machloket, or controversy, difference of opinion, as not only a necessary thing, because different people inevitably see the world differently and see issues differently, but machloket, or controversy, if it's conducted in a way that is respectful of all the parties and has a certain humility, a certain acknowledgement that no individual person can possess the whole truth. Only God can possess the whole truth. And so to have disagreement means that we limited beings are continuing in the course of our conversation to seek some level of truth that's larger than that which any one of us could have access to on our own. So there absolutely are Jewish norms about how to disagree well in a useful, even sacred way. Unfortunately, in the many, many communities around the country, what has become the norm of Jewish discourse around Israel is very far from that traditional Jewish norm. And it's a serious problem. Now, obviously, this problem affects not only the Jewish community; it afflicts all of American society and the world as a whole. And we're up against something very big in a sense, but it's here within the family, in the Jewish community, that we really need to do something about this, because our numbers are decreasing as it is. There's all kinds of polling data that suggests that Jewish young people are leaving the community in very significant numbers, and very pointedly stepping back from the Israel conversation and from Israel commitment for a number of reasons, but one of which, as I've heard from many young people, is how alienating it is for them to see what passes for dialogue all too often in the mainstream Jewish community. So these dialogues or conversation about Israel goes wrong for all kinds of reasons, and it has to do with the way in which confronting or encountering a way of seeing the world, or seeing an issue that's different from our own, is threatening and pushes buttons at a very deep level. They're very natural responses, human responses, that cause us to sort of lash out when we feel threatened or challenged by hearing an opinion that's very different from our own. So it would seem like a very hard thing to intervene on that very natural pattern. But it turns out that there really are ways to do this. And the Jewish Dialogue Group has pioneered some of the best approaches and created some of the best materials that I've seen anywhere to address this problem. Most especially, the Jewish Dialogue Group has created a guidebook in collaboration with the Public Conversations Project, which is a national expert on the issue of polarized conversation in communities. And the Jewish Dialogue Group has taken this guidebook that specifically helps Jews to consider how to change the instinctive or negative way that we might thoughtlessly conduct our conversations across ideological boundaries about issues related to Israel, and instead to transform them with a level of knowledge, with a level of mindfulness, with a level of experience that gives people hope, that lets people know that there really is a way to change this conversation. There isn't necessarily a way to make everyone else think like me, but that's really not necessarily the optimal goal. The goal is for us to do our conversations in a way that we're not tearing our community apart, as has happened in so many communities around the country. The Jewish Dialogue Group has taken its guidebook and taken its methodology to many different communities around the country, different demographics, different kinds of institutions, and it virtually uniformly had people respond that they really had never believed that it would be possible to have a conversation among people holding disparate views of issues related to Israel in such a respectful and really useful and hopeful way. Over and over again, people come out of their facilitated dialogues, guided by the Jewish Dialogue Group, saying, now we know that it really is possible to talk one another in this way, and it means we can do it. It means we can stop harming in our communities in the way in which we're conducting these conversations. And this, people say over and over again, this experience has convinced me that we can really approach these issues in a much more positive way, in an ultimately more Jewish and redemptive way that's ultimately better for the Jewish community and arguably better for Israel as well. I so appreciate the work that the Jewish Dialogue Group has been doing. I use the guidebook in my own teaching and facilitating very regularly and find it to be the most effective and accessible form of facilitation training that I have ever encountered, and I'm very grateful for it.